Howdy everyone. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to review my past year of training with you all, and if you're wondering why I'm reviewing a past year of training in May, that's just because my training year revolves more around the academic year and the collegiate training cycle rather than the calendar year. So basically my years start and finish towards the beginning of May every year when our conference championship is. So let's get into it now. So the first thing I want to go through with you is a statistic that generally speaking tells me how well I do in a year of running, and that is the number of miles that I run in a year. So this goes all the way back to my 2010-11 school year, which was my freshman year of college, and progresses all the way up to today. So here are all the years prior to this and how many miles that I ran each year. Now, relatively speaking, 2,400 my freshman year doesn't seem like much, but that was a lot more than I was doing in high school, and I got a lot better. And then as you can see from my freshman to sophomore year, I had another big jump in mileage going from a little over 2,400 to a little over 3,000. And likewise, I saw a big jump in performance from my freshman to sophomore year. So after my sophomore year, you can see that I hovered around 3,000 miles for a couple more years, and those years really blend together pretty well. I could pick out good races and bad races from each year, but like I said, they all just kind of blend together, and they're very similar performance-wise over the course of the whole year. But then my fifth year is when things really took off again, and I saw another big jump. 3,250 isn't a huge increase from 3,000, but it was more about the density of work within that 3,250 because in my fifth year of college, I did experience more adversity through injury than I did in prior years. So like I missed a couple weeks of training in the summer due to plantar fasciitis that year. I missed a few weeks in the winter due to what was probably a stress fracture, but I don't know for sure. But either way, I was running a lot more mileage per day of training that I was doing, and I still got more mileage over the course of the whole year. So that's when I saw probably my biggest jump in fitness from my fourth year to fifth year of college. So then for the next couple years after that, I was back to hovering a little bit over 3,000, which those years were better than my early years of college where I was hovering around 3,000, but that's mainly because I was still benefiting from the year of training in 2014 and 15. So that work doesn't really go away, and you can lower mileage and still, be better than you were at that mileage at a previous time because you put in more work. But 2017-18, this is kind of a unique year as well because 2,800 was my lowest in a while, but the first half of that year was phenomenal. So like I had a really good cross-country season, racing a couple times unattached, and then that's when I ran my official 5K PR and the Houston Half Marathon. But then my months after that of like February, March, and April, they were pretty rough. So the mileage over the course of the whole year wasn't up to par, but the mileage that I was putting in while I was running was really, really good. So that did lead to a few good races, but kind of some rough parts in the year as well. And then 2018-19, as you can see, that was a very rough year. That was the lowest mileage I'd run over the course of the past decade. A very injury-ridden year, not very much success to speak of at all in the whole year. So bad year, but I was coming off of that determined to get back to my normal self. So this past year, 2019-20 school year, I did run a personal best in annual mileage by quite a bit. I ran 3,578.5 miles, which was a personal best by over 300 miles. So a really great year in terms of training and mileage. So now this is kind of another unique year in terms of directly correlating the number of miles that I ran to the success that I had. One, because it's hard to determine the success I had because I really only raced one time. It was my intention to race a lot more this outdoor season, but not a whole lot outside of that. So even if I did race this outdoor season, I don't think this year would have been as successful as many of my prior years. But the main reason for that is because I had such a crappy previous year that I was basically digging myself out of a hole. So kind of no matter how hard I trained this year, it was going to be hard to rebuild to my prior fitness in the span of this year. So it was a very, very successful year training-wise, but not necessarily racing-wise. But I think what that really means is that since I had such a great year of training and now I'm starting from a much higher base of fitness compared to last year, if I could put together another year of even 3,000 or higher, I'd like to be able to run 4,000 miles next year, but basically, I think if I can manage over 3,000, I think it's going to be a really great year because I built a great base of fitness over the course of this past year. So now I just want to run you through some numbers in training from the past year, and this past year worked out to be 364 days, of which I spent 307 of those training, and I had 57 days off. Of those days off, 38 of those were just regular days off from the bulk of those come like after a big mesocycle of training, where I take like, a week completely off and then a week partially off as well. So basically there's 2 of those in a year, and then there's just periodic days off in a week throughout the year. So 38 days off just because I felt like I needed a day off. 10 of those days non-training were due to sickness, and then 9 of those were due to injury. So I'm pretty pleased with those numbers. The sickness one, it's hard to control that one. I would like to bring that number down, obviously, but the injury one, only missing 9 days due to little, not major injuries, but taking time off because of something hurting. 9 days I think is pretty solid. I would obviously love that to be 0, but that's just pretty tough to do when you're trying to train really hard and be the best you can be. So over the course of the 364 days, I was averaging just under 10 miles a day. It was like 9.8, and then that works out to be 68.8 miles per week over the course of the year. Now, I think another important statistic to look at is the miles per day that you were running of the days that you were training. So you just completely disregard the days off. So of the 307 days that I was training, I was averaging 11.66 miles a day, which is closer to 80 miles per week. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I'll put the number up here, but so I'm pretty pleased with that one. And then over the course of the year, the highest mileage week that I hit was 106 miles, and that was actually my only week over 100 miles, but I did hit 15 weeks that were 90 or higher, and then I hit 22 weeks that were 80 or higher, and I hit 30 weeks that were 70 or higher. So basically over half the year, I was spending at 70 miles per week or higher. So I'm pretty pleased with that as well. So now I'm going to take you through the year in a graphical format. This is a graph of my mileage per week over all 52 weeks in the year. And I'm just going to talk about what was the intent and purpose of the training at certain points throughout the year. So starting off, you can see the first couple weeks were pretty low. That first week was kind of continuing on from a period of time where I was just running probably like 35 to 40 miles per week over the course of the spring of the previous year. I was returning from injury, and I was just trying to run some sort of consistent mileage, not a ton obviously, but just get something in to get used to running again. And then that second week was very much of a down week to prepare myself for the summer build. So this section that's highlighted right here was my summer training, and the purpose of the summer training was to get myself up to a level of volume that I was used to again. So I wanted to very gradually progress there. I wanted to rest in periods throughout there. I wanted to be building slowly to that, make sure my body has time to adapt. So the goal was to get back up to 90 miles per week. Which was successful. That was basically my best case scenario. I thought if everything went well, I could get it back up to 90. And then so that's what I did. You can see I was basically increasing for a period of 3, 4, even 5 weeks at a time, and then I would come back down a little bit and then start building up again. So a little bit of a stair step, go up a few steps, come down a step, up a few steps, down a step, and whatnot. So the summer went really well. I wasn't really killing workouts, but over the summer I was doing mainly a lactate threshold workout each week and maybe a little bit of hill work each week as well, but wasn't too ambitious, making sure I wasn't working too hard on those while I was building the volume back up to a normal level. So then my next highlighted section, this was the cross-country season, which I wanted to be able to hover around 90 to 95 miles per week, and there were a few occasions where I wanted to get over 100, but it just didn't work out in the week, and I didn't feel like pushing it that much and everything. So most of those weeks did end up somewhere in the 90s. You can see here in the middle, this is where I did plan to do my first race of the year. It was going to be a 4-mile cross-country race, but the timing on everything was just terrible with races that I'd planned, and I got really sick the night before the race, and I decided it would be best not to race. So I didn't race. My mileage suffered for a few days. I missed like a few days of training due to sickness, but then mileage was kind of compromised around that. So I missed some training towards the end of 1 week and at the beginning of 1 week, so that just resulted in a couple 50 to 60 mile weeks or so. And then once I recovered from that sickness, I built right back up to above 90, and then I had another smaller week because that's where I did do my only race of the year. That was an 8K cross-country race at the University of Kansas at the Rimrock Farms cross-country course. And that race went pretty well. Unfortunately, usually it's a pretty fast course for the college courses and everything, but it was very, very sloppy conditions, so the winner only ran like 25:20 something, I think, who's a runner who qualified for the Olympic trials in the marathon, 14:0s, 5K guy. I ran like 26:50 or 26:48, something like that. I can't remember, but it was a good competitive effort, and it was good to just get back out there racing again. And then after that race, I was in a period where I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I was going to keep training hard for a couple more weeks if I felt good, and I did feel pretty good, so I kept training and finally got a week over 100 miles. And then that's when I decided, hey, I'm just going to go out and run a marathon on my own. So this last week before I dipped down to nothing was my marathon week. Ran 2:34:48 was my unofficial time. It was very, very unofficial. It would be very close to what a marathon distance would be, but I can't call that an official time by any stretch. So somewhere around 2:35 is what I ran for a marathon. That was very tough. It was challenging. It was my first one ever on my own. Had a good support crew, but that was a good way to end my fall training cycle on a big effort and just experiencing what the marathon was like a little bit. So moving on to the next big segment, this was my indoor season, which as you can see started with a good amount of rest after the marathon. So I had a week completely off and then a few more days in the next week. I think I only ran like 2 days in that second week. And then my build back up to normal mileage was much quicker than it was in the summer, just because I made it through the fall and summer healthy. So I didn't need to be as gradual with the build and volume, but I did still take a fair amount of weeks to get back up to around 90. So throughout this period, I was struggling with plantar fasciitis pretty bad, but I was mostly training through it. Earlier I mentioned the number of days that I took off in the year due to injury, and I don't include these days, so I was basically taking a day off in most weeks. I could have run on those days, but I just felt like it was best in terms of the week, so those were just regular days off. So this next big dip in mileage is really the first time over the course of the whole year where I was taking days off because I was basically forced to due to injury. I was dealing with some pretty bad patellar tendonitis or runner's knee at that time, and just wouldn't have been smart to train through it. I tried running some, didn't go well. My stride was definitely compromised. I couldn't run without limping, so had about a week off of days during that time due to injury, so that was kind of spread out among 2 weeks, so didn't take a week fully off, but did have a good amount of time off in a couple weeks. And again, that was bad timing because I planned on doing an indoor race, planned on racing a 3K, and this happened probably a week and a half before I was racing, and definitely just wouldn't have been smart to race, so I didn't get to race. So right after I recovered from the patellar tendonitis, I was able to put together some good training for a couple more weeks. Ran some really good workouts and was really encouraged by how the fitness was coming along. And then just as I was starting to get really, really fit, that's when the biggest sickness of the year happened. So once again, terrible timing because I was planning on doing a half marathon race, more as a hard long run than a real race, but I was planning on doing that at the beginning of March, and that sickness put me so out of commission that I didn't even want to go do it as just like an easy long run just because I was struggling that much. So bad timing once again. Just the few races that I wanted to do, they weren't working out for me. So that week of sickness basically marked the end of what was kind of my indoor season. It wasn't really a season because I didn't race at all, but basically after that I was like, okay, I just need to scrap that and I just need to start from scratch and build for the outdoor season now. So once I was able to start running again after the sickness, it did take me a couple weeks to feel like myself again. It took a long time for all the symptoms to go away and everything and just gain my strength back. So spent a couple weeks right above 50 miles, and that was all easy running. I didn't do any workouts. I guess I did some moderate running in there, but no like lactate threshold workouts, or definitely not VO2 max workouts or anything. So just spent a couple weeks getting my legs back underneath me, and then this is when all the coronavirus stuff went down, and like the NCAA seasons were canceled and everything. So kind of just figuring out what to do for the next 6 weeks, because the thing that I'd been training for all year was the outdoor season. That was really the goal, to build up to that, and now that was gone. So I just kind of had to figure out what I wanted to do with these last 6 weeks of the year. So over those 6 weeks, I think I averaged 96 miles per week, and what you don't see in the graph is the quality work that was inside of those weeks as well. And basically I was doing at least 2 hard workouts a week. Most of the weeks it was just like 2 really hard efforts, and then easy running around that. But I would also do a good long run that may have had some moderate pace stuff in it, and the long run was always like 16 to 18 miles. So prior to this, the most consecutive 90 plus mile weeks that I'd ever put together was 4. So I put 6 weeks together that were all at least 94 miles, and then it's probably not the most miles that I've ever put in a 6-week period, because I've had some ridiculous training cycles where, you know, maybe I had a week of 80 in there, so it's not all the consecutive 90 plus mile weeks, but that was a very, very solid 6 weeks of training. So now here I am in the beginning of my 2020 and 2021 training year, and basically I took a week completely off. That's how I started the year, just resting up from all the training that I did in the past year. And now this week, I'm towards the end of it. I've gone for 3 runs so far. I'll do 1 more tomorrow, so I'm just going to get somewhere around like 25 to 30 miles this week, and next week I'll transition back to running almost every day again, so I'll probably run 5 or 6 days next week. But really just allowing myself a chance to recover and regroup, and also psych myself up for the next year of training. So I can't keep burning the candle at both ends for too long, so rest in an annual cycle is definitely important. So I've been making sure to do that, to be a regular dude and just enjoy some indulgence, eat some bad food, and sleep a lot, take naps and whatnot. So just enjoying time off right now, but I'm still very, very excited to get back into training for next year. So that's all I have for this video, and I will see you in the next one.